Hello, I'm Cheryl Meyer, and I'm otherwise known as Cheryl M. Health Muse. And what my goal is to inspire you to lead a healthier life. So when I proposed my podcast, I proposed that we present it in two different segments. The first one is It Feels Good to Feel Good, Future-Proof Your Health, where I get to share everything I have learned to return my health back to relative wellness and to live a pain-free life in spite of the fact that I have autoimmune disease. But the second part of my podcast is this episode, and that's Tell Me Your Story, the Health Muse is in. My concept with this is it's all fine and well that you hear me tell my story, but I get a lot of, it's all fine and well that it worked for you, but it's not going to work for me. And I wanted you to hear that there are lots of people out there that have made changes in their lifestyle that have supported their health and brought them back to relative wellness. We all have a couple things in common. We all owned our own health. Whatever the doctor was suggesting we did was going on a parallel path to us making these lifestyle changes where we did things that cleaned up our toxic load. We all pay attention to our body. You'll hear jazz in the background because I want you to listen to the rhythm of your health, and I want you to pay attention to what your body is telling you. My body had been trying to tell me that I was going to topple over into toxic load for some time. I just wasn't listening. So if you clean up your lifestyle and if you listen to your body, you have a very good chance not of being deprived in any way, but returning to feeling darn good. And that's what these podcasts are really all about. So thank you for joining me. This is going to be a Tell Me Your Story, the Health Muse is in episode, and I hope you enjoy it. And I hope that we all inspire you to lead a healthier, happier life. Thank you. Welcome to another edition of Tell Me Your Story, the Health Muse is in. And I have an incredibly exciting guest with me today. Today, we are joined by Joe Cross, who hugely impacted my journey when I first started out 9 years ago with autoimmune disease and had no clue what I was looking for and how I was going to turn my health around and ditch my pain, which I thought was from autoimmune disease, but honestly didn't know because conventional medicine had no idea what was wrong with me back then. And by watching a film that Joe put out, I knew that if I turned to nutrition, and he was actually juicing in the middle of farms in the middle of America. If he could do that, I could figure out how to do this and get my health back. So I am really excited to have Joe join us today because his story is important. And if the two of us can do it, you can do it too. So welcome, Joe, all the way from Australia. I am so thrilled to have you here today.
Thank you, Cheryl. It's an honor to be on your show, and I'm excited.
Thank you. I'm excited to have you here. So where I'd like you to start is by sharing with my listeners what made you know that you needed to do something to change your health.
Well, Cheryl, like most people, I was sort of just cruising along, thinking life was wonderful and that when people get sick, that kind of happens to someone else, you know? Someone else has the heart attack, someone else gets the cancer, someone else has the strokes. Someone else has all those diseases. And that was probably the better part of my 20s and early 30s, is I just felt absolutely invincible. And in my early 30s, around 32, 33, I got sick. And I got sick. And of course, Cheryl, what do you do when you get sick? You go to the doctor. And the doctor gives you pills. And I took pills. And after a month of the pills, I said, "Hey, doc, when are we going off the pills?" He said, "Joe, probably never." And all of a sudden I went, "What?" And that was the first sort of moment that I realized that I had not just a disease, but a chronic disease, or not just an illness, I guess is a better word. I had a chronic illness. And so I basically, at that stage, just accepted it. I guess was the best way of summarizing it. I just accepted it. I just said, oh, well, it's the luck of the draw. That's me. I'm now one of those statistics. I'm one of the people who has to take pills the rest of my life because I was busy and I was doing other stuff. And so I didn't want this to get in the way of my other stuff I was doing. But of course, as most people will tell you when you have an illness, they tend to get in the road. They tend to get in the way. They tend to upset and change and alter your life. And for me, my illness was something called, that the medical term is chronic urticaria angioedema, which is another way of saying chronic hives on your skin. And the angioedema part is that the swelling of these hives doesn't appear on the surface of the skin, it appears under the dermis. So the layers of skin called the dermis, it actually happens underneath. And so when the skin is tight, that histamine being released, that's the reaction that your body just thinks there's like something wrong when there really isn't, but your body just doesn't know and it sends the wrong message. All of that fluid goes into joints, it swells up, you look like Elephant Man sometimes, you have just terrible pain. It's like a chronic arthritis. It's a very painful experience. So there is no cure. There's no like, oh, take this pill. They bombard you with a steroid. And that steroid is sort of like takes out everything. It's not just focused on your problem. And it dulls down your response, your response, which in turn enables you to get through a day and get through life. And of course, that was something that I made a sort of a deal with, or a pact with, if you like, essentially for 8 years, until I was 40. And it wasn't until my 40th birthday that I realized that what I had accepted for the last 8 years, this was going to be something of my future and possibly shorten my lifespan, and what was going to be the next thing to break, and what was the next medical tablet I was going to be put on, or prescription drug that I was going to get, because I was already on 2 or 3 at this stage, and maybe I'd be on 7 by my 50th birthday. And
is it considered
15.
an autoimmune disease, what you had?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
well,
absolutely.
And it's very common when you have one autoimmune disease. There's something called multiple system disease,
right,
where you start to accumulate autoimmune diseases. And I want to
Yeah,
say that because anybody listening, I want them to know if they've got one, more are in their future.
You've already got this, the system is broken, and because you are masking it with this high doses of prednisone, you are then masking other problems that haven't reared yet, you see, and so you don't know how bad they're getting. And so there's whole lots of complications with prednisone. And look, people who are on it out there listening to the show, as they know, have been told by their doctors, you just can't go off prednisone. You have to very slowly. So I'm not suggesting to anybody go off their medication, because if they're on it for a reason. But the long-term effects can certainly lead to increased risk of osteoporosis, hunchback, moon face, all sorts of issues that can go to your longevity and quality of life. So I go back to my 40th birthday, and it was like something happened, Cheryl. I don't know what it was. It was kind of like a light, an alarm, a bell ringing, however you want to sort of use that catchphrase. But I kind of sort of had this sort of feeling of, guilt, in that I really hadn't tried to do anything about this. I just accepted, I just handed over the controls of my health, the responsibility of my health, to the doctors. I wasn't a participant in trying to solve this problem.
Which most of us are not.
Yeah, it's very much the where you are just like, you may as well not even be in the room when they're making the decisions. And so it was a very reactive approach I took in the beginning, the beginning being 8 years. So then I decided that I would make a proactive effort and that I would get involved and I would take back that responsibility and own it and see if there was something that I could do that could alleviate this this problem. And maybe I could, and maybe I couldn't. I didn't know. It wasn't like, oh yeah, if you do this, that'll work. Because if I'd known that, I would have done that day one of 8 years ago. So I really didn't know, but there was something that was telling me that at least I better give it a try, because if I don't try, I'll never know. So I think that's an important first point for people out there, that if you've given it every shot, if you've tried everything, well, fair enough. Like, you've tried. You can sort of, the expression goes, put the cue back on the rack and say, you know, I'm out, you know. But if you haven't tried everything, if you haven't really put the effort into, you know, as the saying goes, you know, turn over every stone, you know, don't leave any stone unturned, then you got to really, you owe it to yourself to
And
try
you
it.
don't need anybody's permission to
No.
start to do things
No.
that might improve your health.
It's right.
You don't know if they're going to, I didn't even know what I was looking for when I started out. So I totally understand.
And I think you got to be sensible, you got to be logical, you got to do it in conjunction with the medical help you're getting. You've got to like seek alternative, ask different questions and get different answers, speak to multiple people. Today's world, there is so much information out there, whether it's on podcasts or in blogs or with influencers. There's lots of doctors who do things online. So you don't necessarily need to pay big bills to get this information. It's actually out there. It might take you longer to find it, but there's a lot of content is what I'm trying to say that's on the subject now. What I'm talking about was back in 2006. And while there was a lot of content, you know, I mean, the iPhone hadn't even come out yet. So this idea of a podcast, this idea of a lot of this content didn't really exist. And you had to sort of just go to the book department at Barnes and Nobles and go into the self-help or to the medical section. There were a lot of books back then, I will say that. I read a lot of books. So the next step, once you realize that you are going to take a proactive role, the real question is, well, what are you going to do? You know, what's that next step? And I find that this is a very important part of the process that I went through, which was sort of just calming the waters down around me and just trying to listen to my inner voice as to what I really thought was the problem. Like, try and block out all the noise. And what I call it is get into the house of mirrors and have a good hard look at yourself and have an honest conversation with yourself. Because 99 times out of 100, you kind of know what you're doing wrong. There's an innate sort of guidance system.
Yeah, I found the body is very smart. But
yeah, it's a lot smarter than we'll ever be. And so you got to try and find that voice and listen and take some inner messaging. And to me, it came down to what I was putting into my body, because I kind of knew that I wasn't eating the way I should. Everybody knows what is good for them to eat, and everybody knows what is not so good for them to eat. So that kind of thing was something that was playing on my mind, that was I really putting my body into this position of strength, of healing, giving it a healing opportunity. So I sort of started out with this idea that I would return back to Mother Nature. I'd sort of turn my back on Mother Nature sort of when I left school, high school. So like 17, 18, I kind of left home. I was out living by myself with mates and having a good time, eating takeaway food, eating junk food, like living like that. I didn't really cook for 10 years. I was just always eating out of brown paper bags and plastic cups and, stuff like, as you know, it's kind of like a long college. But anyway, even though I didn't go to college, I just started working. So that was another problem in a way, that I had the money to live like this. It wasn't like I had the resources to eat out every night, which was kind of like a catch-22. So even though I was playing sport, competitive sport, I wasn't overweight, but I wasn't necessarily feeding my system the fruits, vegetables, nuts, beans, seeds, whole grains, the food from the plant world that all of my ancestors for tens of thousands of years had evolved with, had grown with. The reason why we have become the most successful species on the planet is because of our use of this plant food. If this plant food didn't exist, we wouldn't exist. And here was I basically giving the bird to Mother Nature when I'm 17, and you can't ignore the biological laws of cause and effect. Pretty much one day it's going to catch up with you. And it caught up with me, call it 15 years later, 32. So that was an inner voice that I knew I had to change, but I didn't want to change, but I kind of like was tug of war. And it wasn't like just on my 40th birthday, I kind of knew this all the way, but I just didn't have the gumption to stand up to it. The inner voice was being drowned out by the outside voices.
Yeah, we don't even really think about it until our feet are to the fire.
Yeah.
And then suddenly.
Yeah,
Okay.
you're forced. And I think a birthday of turning 40 was a big sort of moment. You go from 30s to 40s. I mean, I'm 55 now, but back then you think 40 is really old. When you go 39 to 40, it's like, oh God, it's over. Now, of course, 40 is a spring chicken. But anyway, at that moment in time, that's how you're thinking. And that's what's relevant, is my own perspective. So I kind of knew that I had to go back to Mother Nature. So that was one point. By this stage in my career in business and working, I was working very long hours. I was eating a lot of crap. I wasn't exercising. So my weight had really blown up out of control. Now, I've always been a big guy, and I am a very big guy. Like, I'm strong. I'm 6'2". I've always been like an athlete. If I played American football, or I'd be a linebacker. Like in rugby, I'm front row, second row. So I mean, I'm built a certain way where I'm always thick, strong, in that sort of zone. So it's very easy for my frame to carry a lot of weight, and you don't even recognize it's coming on. And then all of a sudden, you're 320, 330 pounds, and you're only 220 last summer. It's kind of like that. So when I say I was up at 330, my fighting weight at sport as an athlete was like 230, 240. So it wasn't like I was 200 pounds more than I should have been. I was overweight, but that wasn't my main problem. My main problem was the illness. And as to my weight problem, I don't know how much of that affected my health. I don't know. I will never know. But it was also a problem for me. So that's where the title for my film, Fat, Sick, and Nearly Dead, comes from, is that when I looked in the mirror at 40, I was fat, I was sick, and because of the trajectory I was going on, I basically went, because it's a movie, I went a little bit extreme and said, well, I'm nearly dead because I'm heading in this direction. So I'm a lot closer to death than I would be if I wasn't sick or I wasn't fat. So, so when you line up those two problems, you now have to think, all right, well, how are you going to solve those two problems? What's logical? Well, I'd already said to you that with the sick, I was going to go back to eating plant food, and with the fat, I thought about fasting. So when you combine those two ideas, you come up with juice. It's a compromise. juice is effectively water that's been trapped in plants. It's been brought up through the root system into the watermelon, into the celery, into the cucumber, and most of these plants are in the 99% water factory or percentages anyway. So when you drink fresh cucumber, celery, lemon, ginger, apple, kale juice, which I call them mean green, you are drinking the water from all of those plants that's been filtered through those plants. And during that filtering process, you're bringing in these incredible, valuable micronutrients, which I had been sort of starving my body of. I wasn't allowing these micronutrients to put in. I was putting the macronutrients in every day. I was putting the protein, I was putting the fat, I was putting the carbohydrates in, but they were coming in brown and white and black food. And they weren't in anything that was colored, was artificial color. I wasn't putting in the things that were coming in the natural form. So I really had like a 20-year sort of starvation of micronutrients. Sure, I had a salad every now and then, but in terms of the right balance, I was effectively starving myself of these micronutrients. And I think that's a really important thing for people to understand and listen to, is that it's not just, hey, eat your salad, or hey, have your veggies, they're good for you. They're not just good for you, they're actually essential for you. It's so essential that if you don't take them, you cannot function in the long term. You will break. You will break down.
They're the building supplies that the body needs for regeneration, which it's doing all the time.
Yeah, I like to use the analogy that the micronutrients are the information. So I kind of think about the macronutrients, so that protein, carbohydrate, and fat. That's like your energy. That's like your fuel that allows you to move and go. You know, your carbohydrates give you that power. Your protein allows you to build that mass, and so on. But the micronutrients, it's not so much energy. It doesn't enable you to run a marathon. It doesn't help you do those things. What they do is they ensure that the communication system within your body and within each individual cell, that they do what they're supposed to do and do it efficiently. It's kind of like the software, if you like, of your system. And
I call it code.
Yeah.
It's the code that your body operates on.
Yeah. And so that when you starve it from that information, parts of your system have to sort of just go it alone. They have to make it up. And going it alone is autoimmune disease. It's like, you know, you've got this miscommunication going on, because at the end of the day, my body was miscommunicating with my brain. My brain was saying there's an invasion going on. Whenever I touched or pressed against something, whenever there was physical touch, I would get swollen, I would get hives. So a belt, holding anything in my hands, baby, girlfriend on my shoulders at a concert, whatever I was doing, whenever there was like seatbelt, whatever, physical touch, hives. So going back to this miscommunication and these micronutrients, how essential they were, I quickly realized that, boy, I just need to pump up my micronutrient intake. So that was the compromise of fasting with juice. So this didn't all happen overnight. This took me some time to come to read, to learn. And then when I finally decided I was going to do this, when I finally got the courage up, the conviction, the strength, when I really sort of got myself into a headspace that I'm going to do this, I started telling people. And some of my friends said, that's great. Others said I was crazy. That's life. You're going to get the pros and the cons. On a whole, most people were supportive. My original concept was to do 60 days of juicing and 22 months. So it'd be 2 years in total of just eating plants, because I figured I was 40, so I couldn't just do a week of eating plants. That wasn't going to be enough to do the repair. I figured, like, if you do like 5% of your life, 10% would be 4 years, but 5% of your existence would be 2 years. And that would be a good enough sort of test to see if I could get off the medication, get stronger, get healthier, be in a state of balance.
Let me ask you a question. Was your doctor supportive of you doing this?
At this point in time, what I'm still coming up with the ideas, I haven't gone to them yet. So
Okay.
Eventually, when I had everything worked out what I wanted to do, the answer was yes. Then they were, okay? That they were of the view that I was smart enough, that I had taken the time to go through this, that I was open enough that during the juicing, if something was to happen, I was to stop, and they were monitoring it. So they were getting the data every 15 days. They were seeing how things were going. So it wasn't like I just ran off and did something without telling anybody. It wasn't that. I think you'll find that most doctors are open to the idea of people eating lots of fruits and vegetables. And if you tell them that you're going to do it in a kind of extreme way, as long as you keep in touch with them and you work with them, they're going to be open to that idea, you know? So, and it's not like I'm doing it for the rest of my life. This was just for a period of time, okay? And so once I had this blueprint of 60 days of juice, and then the way I was looking at it, it was 2 years of plants, supercharging the first 2 months with juice. So once I had that plan in place, I then started telling people about that. And most people thought I couldn't do it. Most people thought I was crazy. Most people thought that. But a couple of friends said, you know what, you should film this, because you're the least likely person to do something like this. You're a business guy, you know, you're someone that isn't like the guy living up on the mountain with the long hair and the beard, although during the lockdown I did get a beard, but that was another story. But basically back then I was clean cut and in a suit most of the time. So I thought, yeah, that's not a bad idea. I'll give that a shot. I'll try that. Maybe that'll be fun, and maybe that'll help me do it. You know, having a camera on me, it's kind of like
it
and
certainly
also
held you accountable.
And if it works, then it'd be great to show other people that this can work. So the idea of the camera sort of was a two-part process of help me, help others. Let's do it. And so that was in 2007. I finally got started. And in fact, just 2 days ago was the 14th anniversary of finishing my 60 days. So it was 14 years ago, 2 days ago, that I just finished my 60 days. And so it was a very difficult process to start, because just drinking juice is really hard, and to do it for 2 months, I don't want to brush over and say, oh yeah, I just did that, and then no, you can't brush over something like that. It's monumental in terms of how difficult it is. But hey, you know what? As the saying goes, no pain, no gain. You've got to go through this. If it was that easy, everybody'd be doing it. And it's just a very, very, very tough thing to do. But the good news is, as the days go by, it gets easier. So the hardest hurdle is the beginning. And once you get past day 5, day 10, day 15, every 5 days are easier than the 5 days before. And then you get into a zone where you're kind of like in overdrive. And so once I got into the 40s, I could have kept going. I mean, when 60 came, I wasn't even thinking about eating food. I was in a great zone. I could have just kept going. Could have gone to 100, but I had a film to make, and I had a film crew that was costing me a fortune, so I had to stop. I think if I didn't have a film crew, I probably would have kept going, because I was feeling so amazing. And you know, I've never done 60 days again since. I've thought about it, because of how good that feeling is. I've gone 30 days since. I've done 30-day fasts, and many 15, many 10, many 5s. But, you know, maybe people ask me that, and I kind of feel that that 60-day fast was such a spiritual awakening that maybe next year, my 15th year anniversary, maybe I'll do another one just to get back to that state, because I don't take any medication. I'm not sick or anything, but there was more about a spiritual sort of level. I'm not talking about spiritual as in religious. I'm talking about a level of awareness and enlightenment and just wonder about nature and being I guess I was ODing on nature, because I was, you know. So you sort of become so much more aware, your senses, you're in tune more. And the way I describe it is you're climbing a mountain, and you get to the top, and your view is unparalleled to anything you've ever seen. So, you know, you handle stress a lot better. You don't get anxious, you don't get anxiety, you don't get angry, you know, road rage, all those things that you have in normal everyday life, they are non-existent when you're on a fast like this. You are very much in a zone where you're at one with the world and nature. And those people that have done fasts that are this long, all of them to a T, understand what I'm talking about and talk about it. They are very, very much aware that generally you've got to go more than 30 days for this sort of, it can happen earlier, but generally it happens in this sort of 30, 40-day zone. And it's a beautiful thing, and it's kind of addictive. I haven't been back there since, but it's the more I talk about it now, I'm thinking, yeah, I've got to get that happening in January or February or March. Yeah.
How long did it take you before your symptoms of your autoimmune disease started to subside?
So by the end of the 60 days, I was still on medication. I was off all medication 5 months after I started. So I didn't really need to do the 2 years of eating plants. In fact, I didn't. I did 3 months, because after 3 months, I was completely off all meds and not a single problem. And that was March of 2008. So this coming March is 14 years of being medicine free, and I haven't had a single relapse, not a problem. I haven't had a single issue with my illness. I would say I'm cured, but I would say that's probably going too far, because I think my lifestyle keeps my illness at bay. If I went back to my old lifestyle, I think that illness would rear itself again. So I don't like to use the word cured, but it's not in my life anymore. So while I was juicing, though, the symptoms definitely subsided, but not gone. But, you know, if I sort of was tracking it, the first week to 10 days, they got worse, because you're now under stress, like you're not eating, you're doing something different, you're under pressure, you feel like this immense issue. So all of that stress levels are quite high in the beginning of a fast. It's like a human reaction. You take food away, there's anxiety, there's stress. So you're going to always, no matter what you've got, you're always going to go worse to begin with when you juice or water fast. Nothing just all of a sudden, just, oh, beautiful, you know, day one, oh yeah, I'm just like a little fairy running around happy as Larry. No, that doesn't exist. You go through, your body is going through a stress. Your body is telling you to eat. Every sense in your body, your hearing, your smell, your eyesight, your touch, everything wants you to eat, because that's a survival mechanism. So you've got to push through that barrier, and that takes about a week to really put that at bay. So the first week, generally, I tell people, don't be surprised if your symptoms increase. This is normal, but then your body will calm down and say, we've been here before. Everybody knows how to fast. Every single human has the innate knowledge inside them because all of their ancestors fasted. We just don't have it today because we've built supply chain systems that put food everywhere in every corner. So, and I'm not saying food as in fruits and vegetables, I'm just using the word food as in...
And our ancestors fasted because there wasn't food always available.
Yeah, it was feast and famine, right?
Right. So it just sort of was part of their natural cycle.
Yeah, so for me, it was a no-brainer that my body knew how to do it. Whether I could do it or not was another question. 60 days is a long time, but I did it, and it's the best thing I ever did. And so after the 3 months of eating just fruit, vegetables, nuts, beans, and seeds, I basically was off all meds. So I was very concerned about going back to eating how I was. So I kind of stayed on it in a hybrid. I brought some seafood back in, but I stayed off everything else for another 4 years. I stayed off. I mean, I still haven't had alcohol. I still haven't had cigarettes, and I still haven't had Coca-Cola. So there are certain things that I've never gone back to.
Did you start eating the whole vegetable with the fiber and all at some point?
Oh, you mean after the juice?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. On day 61, I ate an apple.
Yeah.
You know, like, it's important to sort of explain that juicing is like drinking water with nutrients. It's nutrient water. That's what it is. But you've got a lot of soluble fiber. You don't have insoluble fiber. The insoluble fiber is the fiber, the pulp you can see while you're juicing, or the stringy stuff that's in an orange, or, you know, the solid stuff in an apple. That fiber is really powerful and it's important for us, but it's not nutrients, right? It holds nutrients. It's a supporting structure for nutrients, but fiber itself is not a nutrient. Fiber goes in one end and out the other. Very important. Great. Very important. But during a fast, you're having a lot of soluble fiber, a lot of microfiber. You're not having the big stuff. So your body doesn't need to digest like it normally does. So you've got a whole hiatus of a digestive system having a break, which does a lot of incredible things in terms of the use of blood flow and the ability to do autophagy in other parts of your body by repairing cell structure and just overall maintenance of your system. So when you have a smoothie, when you blend, use a blender, that's not juicing.
That's all the fiber in it.
That's just outsourcing the chewing to a machine. Once it hits your stomach just says, wow, Joe, you've been chewing really well today, but we've still got to go to work separating the fiber from the nutrients. So it's that step of allowing the stomach and the digestive system not to have to do that, which is what we call fasting. That's the critical part we need to make sure, because that requires a whole bunch of hormones and blood and a lot of issues, which now you're not going to necessarily get the benefits of if it doesn't have to do that. So for me, it was very much about allowing my body to be in a position where it could heal itself. So Joe, just get out of the way. On one hand, and on the other hand, Joe, get in the way and give your body those micronutrients. So, you know, the two sides of the story. And, you know, pretty much I have not had any medication issues. I've kept you know, like no alcohol, no smokes. I used to smoke, not a lot, but I used to smoke casually when I had a drink. Coca-Cola was a big problem for me, so I'm very frightened of having Coca-Cola still today. So
it's also, you know, very addictive. So yeah,
I have a ginger ale if I when I play golf or go out and celebrate. Instead of having a beer with my mates, I will have a ginger ale. You know, that's kind of like, you know, my celebration drink, if you like, if I'm out partying. I can't have too many of them in a night though, because I find it difficult to sleep. if you have too many. There's too much going on in a ginger ale. So just 2 or 3 in a night is way out. 2 is really the ideal number. And so pretty much that's kind of where I ended up and how I ended up to where I am today. And, you know, my life changed because of the movie. The movie came out. It's been seen by over 30 million people around the world. It's had this huge impact. I mean, you said it in your introduction.
It had an impact on me, huge.
People like you saw that story. I think the movie worked extremely well because it didn't preach. It didn't tell people what to do. I think people don't want to be told what to do. So this was just a movie of a story of how, hey, I'm doing this. What do you reckon? What do you think?
I think you might want to join me. And it's partly your personality. It was very charismatic. So people did want to try it with you, which was fun in the movie to watch.
Yeah. And now there's been, I don't know how many people, but many hundreds of thousands of people have done a juice fast because of that movie. And that's kind of strange when you think about it. Like hundreds of thousands of people have changed their whole daily life for a period of time. And many people are doing it right now. I mean, right now, there'd be at least, just on our page alone, there'd be over 1,000 people on a juice fast today. And they're just the ones I know about. There's probably a lot more than that, you know? So yeah, so it's been quite a ride.
It's fantastic. Now, since you did the second movie, I see that you did some kind of you did something called the kids menu.
Yeah.
Why did you do that and what is it? Because I am very passionate about changing how we feed America and our children.
Yeah, so when I would go on tour, people would ask me, what about kids, Joe? What about kids? So I just thought there would be something that if I went out and made a film about all the good stuff that's happening with kids, as opposed to all of the pain in the problems. And I made that film and I'm very proud of it. It hasn't got a lot of viewing, like it never really took off on Netflix. By the time Kids Menu came out, Netflix were really doing their own content and pushing a lot of their own content. And it was quite a busy space in 2016, 2017. Whereas when Fat Sick came out in 2011, Netflix didn't have their own content. So the algorithms for promoting it, anybody who watches the Kids Menu, it's on Amazon, it's on iTunes. Anybody who watches it loves the film. They go, oh my gosh, this is amazing. All of these kids doing these wonderful things from all over America and what they're doing. So it's very easy to show a movie with all the problems. Like I can make movies all day long pointing out problems, but trying to find solutions, that's difficult. And so we spent 1.5 years looking for as many solutions as we could, and we sort of showcased them in the Kids Menu.
I also find that people want to tell you what to do without showing you how to do it. And that was one of the things I loved about your film, because it wasn't about you need to do this. You actually showed people how to get down to the nitty gritty and bring it to reality. And that was partly why it was so successful.
Yeah, talk's cheap.
Dealt with the how.
Yeah, talk is cheap. You got to do that. You got to walk.
Right. And then I see that you've also published a book since you did all this.
Oh, I've done a number of books. I forget, 6 or 7 now. Yeah. I mean, yeah, if someone had told me, Joe, you'd be a New York Times best-selling author, my English teacher is probably turning over in her grave right now. I don't think she's even dead. But anyway, there's no way they would have thought that I could write a book because I'm not very good at English. But anyway, I think that what happened is that people wanted a sort of a blueprint of how to do this and what to do. So I wrote a book called the How to Reboot with Joe. And that's been extremely successful and people still buy it today. And then I've done a couple of other books, Fully Charged and Juice It to Lose It. Just a whole bunch of different ideas. We've got juice recipe apps. I'm now involved with the manufacture of an incredible juicer called a Nama. And Nama is a great partner And, you know, the guys there, we sort of got together and sort of said, listen, how do we create a world-class juicer that can really help people? And so, you know, it's sort of become a lot of my, it's not all of my life because I do other things, but it's a big part of my life. And you know, I also think it's important for people to understand that you don't have to be extreme all the time, but it's important sometimes to be extreme for a moment in time. You know, when people go out to Christmas parties or Thanksgiving lunches, you could argue that's quite extreme. You know, like you think about a Thanksgiving lunch for all the American listeners. I mean, a lot of people that I know, that's their biggest meal of the year, Thanksgiving. But they're not eating like that every day. They're not having Thanksgiving meal every day.
Right.
So to go out and enjoy that Thanksgiving meal, that once a year sort of thing, I think that's incredibly beneficial, wonderful, and go out and enjoy it. Because it's an extreme, but it's not done on a regular basis. Likewise with fasting. Fasting's the opposite of that big Thanksgiving lunch. Okay, it's the opposite, but it's not something you do all the time. It's actually not healthy to do it all the time. Okay, your body needs those other building blocks of protein and fat and carbohydrate that are found in macronutrients. It's important to get fiber into your body on a regular basis. So the idea of juicing for like 20 years, that'd be quite unhealthy. That would be, you would not be a healthy human if you did that, right? But to do it for periods of time, 10, 15, 30, 60 days. 60 is still extreme. And if you're going to do what I did, and particularly if you're a woman, you got to make sure that you put some kind of plant protein into your juices, because otherwise you may have a problem with hair falling out. These are all sorts of things that we have discovered along the way. Someone doing a 10-day juice fast, don't worry about the pea protein. Doing more than 15 days and you're female, you better put it in. So there's little bits and tricks in terms of that length, but generally speaking, most of us can do 10 days to 15 days, 2 weeks of juice fasting without much trouble. Now, depending on what sort of medications you're on, you've got to check with your healthcare provider. You've got to talk to who's responsible, because some people on medications, they need to be eaten with a digestive food, so that's going to rule them out. There are caveats. So I'm not coming on saying, oh, yeah, anyone can do it. But generally speaking, our bodies are built to be able to handle this. So people say, yeah, Joe, that was a real extreme thing to do. And I go, yeah, it was extreme, but I needed to do it, because if I didn't do that, what I was doing before was extreme for 20 years, you know? But I was having Thanksgiving lunch basically every day. I mean, I wasn't, but you know what I mean.
Yep. No, I hear you. And I used to finish a Thanksgiving meal and still be hungry and go, why am I still hungry? I just ate this enormous meal.
Yeah.
And it's because we get addicted to all the food and we don't know that we're full.
Yeah. The other thing I would say to people also is I think there's probably too much emphasis on weight and how people look. And I would just make sure that people understand this, that, you know, when you have the percentages of illness in America, and I'll just use America because that's where we're going to.
Right.
This happens in my country, in Australia, in Great Britain. But when you have the percentages of people getting heart disease, getting cancer, having strokes, it's not all just happening to people overweight. It's happening to people of all shapes and sizes. And I think this is really important for anybody who is carrying extra weight or heavier, or feels heavier, looks at themselves in the mirror and thinks they're overweight, is that they've got to really change their mindset for this, because you can start eating well, and within a week or 10 days, you can be healthier than somebody who's stick thin. because
and being thin is not necessarily healthy.
No, it's not. But we have this perception that it is, and it's a terrible perception we have to get rid of. But I guess my point I'm trying to make is, and I'm not saying everybody go out and get fatter. I'm not saying that. What I'm trying to say is that if you change your diet, if you start to eat a lot more produce from the farmers markets that's made by Mother Nature, if you did that for say 20 days where you just ate fruits, vegetables, nuts, beans, and seeds, and you were 400 pounds, okay? After 20 days of doing that, you might be 360, 370, but you could be a healthier 360, 370 than someone who's 150. That's what I'm trying to point out.
I've actually just started running classes called Learn to Eat for Your Future Health. Yeah. Because you probably will lose weight if you take my program, but the goal is not to lose weight. Yeah. The goal is for you to start eating all the phytonutrients that your body needs to be healthy.
Yeah, we have this, you know, I could chop off my leg and I would lose a bunch of pounds, but that's not healthy. So it's like you want to burn fat and you want to keep muscle. As we get older, you know, as I said, I'm 55, and it's very important that the muscle structure that I've got in my shoulder, in my chest, in my back, my lower back, my legs around my knees, it's very important that this muscle structure is strong and that it is solid. And I use it by going to the gym. I mean, my workouts in the gym are mostly lifting. You know, I don't go to the gym and sit on a treadmill and run, you know, for 30 minutes. I mean, that's not good for my joints. I've done those days and I actually get more injured doing things like that. I'm better off doing walks that take my breath away, just get my walking where my breath goes. But I find I get a lot more benefit out of lifting, like going and doing weights. And I've been doing that for about 4 or 5 years now on a consistent basis. And my strength has gone through the roof, and my ability to swim and just the way that my joints work now, it's much better than being, you know, I'm heavier now in terms of muscle mass and fat mass than I was at the end of my fast. I think that I was down, like I went from like 330 to like 210, 220 for a period, you know, and I sit now quite comfortably. Well, I won't say comfortably, but I sit at around 270, 280 on the high side, 250, 260 on the low side. That's where I sit on a regular basis. And, you know, my doctors will say to me, hey, Joe, if you can get down to that 250 and stay there with, you know, 20% muscle, 20% fat mass, as opposed to 26%, 27% fat mass, that's better for you. But overall, people get hung up on just a number. They don't think that it's actually fat, muscle. That ratio is so important, because as we get older, if you don't have that muscle on you, you're going to lose flexibility. And that's when, you know, we've all heard about it. When people take a fall, that can be the end of them. Well, a lot of the reason why those falls are detrimental is because there isn't a muscle mass to protect you for the strength around your joints, around your ligaments. And so this is something that I'm very passionate about. As people age, they really need to focus on this flexibility and building muscle mass. So juicing actually isn't the ideal muscle mass builder, okay? So you've got to be careful that how often you do your juicing in the year of juice fasting versus how much effort you put in and to building your muscles. And, you know, all beautiful vegetables, from broccoli to asparagus to all sorts of vegetables, have incredible amounts of protein that can help build. If you are someone who eats animal product, you can also find, of course, a lot of protein in that source. But if you're a vegan or a vegetarian, you know, it's a real mission. You've got to find your protein and get in there and get that protein. Right. Beans are an incredible source of protein. So it's just important to lead a balanced sort of macronutrient existence if you're trying to build muscle mass.
So people can still do the Reboot with Joe and do the program with your crew, correct?
Yeah, we have a thing called a guided reboot at rebootwithjoe.com. You can go in there, and it's a guided reboot where we take you through a program, and people can do that. Or you can just buy the book, or hey, you can just do it yourself. Watch the movie and join the Joe Cross community on Facebook. Is a place where a lot of beginners. There's about 50,000 people there now, and this is where a lot of beginners come, and that's just a subgroup from the main Fat, Sick, and Nearly Dead page. But you get in there, and there's a lot of incredible people that will help you. So, you know, if anyone wanted to go to that Joe Cross community page and you said, hey, I'm a first-time juicer, what do I need to do? You're going to get like so many people coming in and say, okay, you need this, you need, it's a great community of people helping you out. I used to have to sit on Facebook 10 years ago and answer the questions. I don't need to do that anymore. There are so many wonderful people out there that have all done this, that are willing to help and offer their help. And there are so many juice bars that have started. And I'm just so happy to see all of this happen. You know, like I love people seeing they're making a living out of this. They've actually created businesses. And it's wonderful. It's just a real honor to see how this movement has really grown, where, you know, before my movie came out, people weren't drinking green drinks. Now it's kind of like, you know, it's in TV shows.
Right. And you really were the beginning of all of it.
Yeah, well, I as I like to say, I was a person who went through the door. I wasn't the creator, the owner, or the inventor of it. I just brought awareness to it, you know, and I'm lucky that I was able to have that opportunity.
Now, what's up next for you? What are you working on?
Oh, well, I'm focused on, we're always trying to think about new TV or film content, but you've got to keep pitching to the Netflix of the world. And, you know, we're constantly doing that, but you get a lot of no's, and that's okay. I'm very excited about where NAMA is heading and the business of NAMA. And I play a role there of helping support, promote, come up with ideas for them. So that's exciting. I'm involved in the world of indoor farming and actually trying to bring plant food to cities that generally might have difficulty having access
we have
to
a lot of
local
food
farms.
deserts that need that.
Yeah, and not only just food deserts, I mean, big cities, particularly on the East Coast, they don't necessarily, as you go further towards Florida, as you start to head down, you know, you've got a lot of humidity, so it's difficult to grow their leafy greens. They're 24/7 or all year round. I mean, in Arizona, where you are, in California, I mean, 95% of the leafy greens eaten in America come from those two states.
Right, and I'm spoiled, and I know that.
Yeah, you are spoiled there in Arizona. But, you know, when you get over the East Coast, so these are opportunities. This is technology. This is something that I'm excited about. You know, the ways to improve the juicing community, what I'm doing. I'm a work in progress myself, Cheryl. I mean, I'm somebody that needs constant work. I mean, I'm
a work in progress. And you know what? I think that's fantastic.
Oh, yeah.
Am I where I want to be? I've lost 65 pounds. Am I down to where I want to be? No.
Yeah.
But I don't.
It's a great journey,
anymore.
what you've done so far, and you should be proud of that. So I don't know anyone who's perfect, and anyone who you think is perfect, trust me, they're not. And if you ask them, honestly, they would tell you they're not. But what we can do is we can try and get up each day and be better versions of ourselves. We can try and focus on how we're going to get more micronutrients into our body today. How are we going to honor and respect our body? How are we going to look after it? How are we going to give it some mileage, you know, get some steps underway? How are we going to lift a few weights? How are we going to do all of that as well as enjoy our day by doing the things we have to do? Sometimes you don't enjoy those. You've got to go to work. Other times you can go and spend time with friends and family. So it's a constant thing. And I'm on track 80% of the time, off track 20% of the time. Pandemic was helpful. It was unhelpful. There's all sort of pluses and minuses to everything. But I think having a positive attitude about yourself and loving your plants and loving yourself is two really important relationships you've got to maintain.
I agree. I agree. So thank you. I really
You're very welcome.
appreciate the
Great.
conversation. I'm thrilled to have had you as a guest. I am thrilled to introduce you maybe to a new group of people out there that might not know you, but it's been a great conversation, and it's exactly what I want the people who listen to me to hear. You have to own your own health, and it all goes back to eating the right, and I now call them phytonutrients. I'm a big supporter of Eat the Rainbow. Eat all the colors because they have
Yeah.
a little party in your body, and you need that.
Yeah.
So
Well, Cheryl, thank you very much for having me on the show. I appreciate it. Lovely to meet you. And, keep on doing what you're doing.
thank you.
Spreading that very important word.
Thank you. Thank you for coming on my show. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Juice on.
Juice on.